This Future Construct podcast episode is supported by Applied Software. Applied Software is on a mission to transform industry by empowering their clients and championing innovation with real-world expert consultants. So visit asti.com, it's ASTI.com, and please let them know that we here at Future Construct and BIM Designs sent you. Welcome everyone to the Future Construct podcast. I am your host, Amy Peck. I am very excited for today's guest, Aarni Heiskanen, who is a managing partner at AE Partners and a construction innovation agent at AEC Business, as well as being a blogger and a podcast host. He is also hailed as a top 100 influencer in construction. Welcome, Aarni.
Thank you very much, Amy, and I'm really happy to be here. As you said, I'm a podcaster, and I'm typically the one doing the interviews.
Yeah, so I will do my best now to ask the questions and let you respond, which will be a new event for you. So you're an architect, but of late you've been focused more on construction innovation. So why the shift?
Well, it's a long story, but anyway, so I am an architect, and I was one of the pioneers in computer-aided design already early on, and of course looked at the industry from the architect's point of view. But recently, I have been focusing more on construction, specifically because we have clients who are in the construction side of the industry, and also I find it very fascinating what's happening right now on construction sites. For example, it was a month ago I was here in Helsinki on a construction site that was testing out a Spot robot, the robot Spot, which looks like a dog. For reality capture and 3D scanning, and that was really fascinating. And I think that's one of the pieces of the future that we're going to see more robots on the construction site.
Yeah, I think you're right. Now we have looked at a few different robotics companies on construction sites, and I read an interview. And you've done some fantastic interviews, and so there's so many questions that I'd like to even dig deeper on. But let's kind of unravel kind of the robotics piece and what you're seeing around robotics and maybe some other emerging technology on construction sites, actually in use today, and what have been some of the challenges of bringing this type of new technology onto construction sites?
Yeah, very good question. I think that what most companies are doing on construction site is replacing manual paper-based processes with let's say pads and computers and mobile devices. So they are in a way digitizing manual processes, which is a natural progression, I would say. And but we have noticed that, especially in countries with high labor costs and let's say a high level of construction safety, they are more interested in automating even those tasks that have been traditionally done by humans. And data gathering is one of those tasks. So I think that the first concrete applications for robots will probably be around data gathering and reality capture, as we've seen with the Spot robot. But also I have seen robots that are doing construction site cleaning, so wiping the floors, removing dust, which is very typical on construction sites, and also even some robots that are drilling holes. So some of those more manual tasks will be also probably replaced. But the problem with robots on construction sites is that the site is always changing. It's not the same today as it was yesterday, which means that the the environment is in constant change, and there are people, there are materials, there are tools, and there are all sorts of unexpected obstacles on the side, and that makes using robots really difficult. It's much more difficult than having, for example, a car driving on a road, because a road is basically two-dimensional, but construction site is three-dimensional.
Exactly, and I think that again, and I've heard different. You sort of say this in different ways in different interviews. Is that, you know, on the one hand, the construction side of things are really, you know, ripe for digitization and innovation. But in certain scenarios, there's been either reluctance or it's just been a real challenge to be able to bring this technology in. So how do you see that gap closing?
Well, I think that there are certain, let's say, process side things that are happening, which will eventually require more digitalization on construction sites. And one of those is lean construction. For example, tact production, which is becoming very popular here in Finland and in also in several European countries, and I've seen it also happen in the USA. So lean construction in general means that you have to plan the process, plan the project really in more detail and carefully, and also make sure that everything happens on time. So the management requirements are much higher than in traditional construction. And that's one thing that will speed up the digitalization, because it requires more accurate timing of things, and also seeing what I call a real-time construction site, actually. So that's one thing that is definitely moving the industry forward. And also automation of processes is another thing that we have seen. And that has already happened in design and engineering, but now it's coming to the construction site as well. So there are process-driven reasons why, and also the I would say the overall question of productivity, which means that you must automate and standardize processes.
And you mentioned as well in one of your interviews, which I thought was really intuitive, and it's saying, you know, there's this tendency to just move towards the next shiny object, right? People are talking about robots, people are talking about AI, people are talking about AR and VR, and that there's some dangers in just using technology for technology's sake. And so can you expand on that a little bit, and what advice you give to companies who are looking at this digital transformation?
Yeah, that's a big question. Well, in general, I would say that, first of all, I believe that technology is an answer to many questions, but the first thing is to know what is the problem that you're actually solving. So what is the right problem? If you're solving the wrong problem in a way, for example, trying to do something the old-fashioned way, but just doing it digitally, that may take you a bit further, but it's still not enough. So I would say that maybe you should start, first of all, experimenting with the technology, so that you can get a realistic picture of what it's all about. And I have seen that people on construction sites are really open to experimentation. So, but they have to have time and resources to do that. And if you're just doing it during a really busy project, it's really difficult. So you have to set aside some time and plan the experimentation. And then when you're getting more experienced technology-wise, you can start thinking about your processes. How could we streamline this process? Is there something that we could leave out? Because we know that in construction, about 70% of all work is in a way waste. So it is understanding what that waste is. Is it waste of time? Is it unnecessary movement? Is it lack of information, looking for information, and so on. So when you understand what the waste in your processes is, then you can start thinking about how could we do this better, and how might technology actually help in all this. So it's maybe looking critically at your processes is one of the starting points. And also, what are your goals? What are you trying to achieve? For example, if you are looking for um, shorter time, throughput time, for example, or something else, cost saving, labor saving. If you are trying to do prefabrication, for example, that's one thing that will require more new technology and so on. So it's about goals, and it's about waste, and finally about getting some sort of experience on these technologies.
This episode of the Future Construct podcast is supported by the amazing team at Applied Software. They have solutions for any modern project. Applied Software is on a mission to transform industry by empowering their clients and being the champions of innovation with their real-world expert consultants. They have a comprehensive suite of solutions for AEC, MEP, and manufacturing, and they have a singular focus to help you achieve higher performance. They have software, training, support, consulting, and custom development. Applied Software has you absolutely covered for all of your workflow needs. And BIM Designs is proud to be a client and partner of Applied Software. So visit ASTI.com, that is ASTI.com, and please let them know that Future Construct and BIM Designs sent you. I think, it is true. There's this sort of new shiny object moment, and it makes much more sense to sort of look at it from a problem first perspective. But you said something that I think is really interesting, which is, what are their goals? And I think, we're in the process, at work in general, and particularly on construction sites, of just getting the project done, and there are deadlines to meet and there are targets to hit, so that that it can trigger payments. And so how do companies step outside of that cycle and really project themselves into the future, to think about not just what their goals are in immediate terms, but really what kind of companies do they want to be in the future, and how can companies carve out that type of true innovation within their company construct?
Yeah, that's a good question. I have seen even large construction industry companies that have a really, let's say, thin organization when it comes to development and innovation. So that's one thing. And I understand that that's because it's always easy to save costs because these people are not the cheapest people to have. So it's always easy to save on those, and they typically are not given enough time and resources to actually do anything meaningful. So that's one problem, that we don't have the culture in these companies of innovation and development, or it's more like it looks like there's something happening, but in reality, if you compare it, for example, to the electronics industry, it's really minimal. And also the overall investments in technology, IT technology, are really small. So I think it's a cultural thing. First of all, you have to start thinking about that. But I also understand the financial restrictions and the space that you are having. So it boils down to productivity and profitability. So you must be a well profitable company to be able to do anything like this. So, but one thing that we have, for example, in Finland, been eager to do is to collaborate across companies and across trades. So because construction is it's never a one company show. It's always a question of bringing dozens or even hundreds of companies together on a project. And if you are just meeting for the first time on a project, it's really difficult to innovate anything there. So I would say that in addition to the culture, also do more collaboration with your peers, but also with other trades. And one thing that is also important and has been very fruitful in Finland, for example, is collaboration with government authorities and cities. So I'm not sure if that's as popular in the USA as it is in Finland.
No, and I think again, it depends on the country. I think there are certainly municipalities, and I think at the state level, there are some collaborative efforts. I think at a national level, it poses a challenge in a country like the U.S. But I think you're right. I mean, I think it's an important piece to have a culture of collaboration, and I think even in some regards with your competitors, right? Because at the end of the day, if you're able to elevate the industry as a whole, the theory is there's enough business for everyone. I'm not sure all competitors think that way, but I think the companies that are going to win in the future do have that mindset, and it's about really elevating the industry. Like you mentioned, prefabrication, for example. What do you see, as innovations there, and as some of the benefits of prefabrication?
Well, we have done that in Finland since the 1950s, I guess. So it's really
so it's not new for you.
No, that's not no. So it would be really difficult to imagine a project that would not use prefabrication. But what's happening in there and how technology can help, of course, it's a question of, first of all, we came up with standards in Finland in the 1960s and early 70s for concrete construction. So we have standardized in a way the Lego blocks in a way that we are using. So that's one thing. To become more efficient and to get the gains from prefabrication, which means that we can have several different manufacturers that are basically manufacturing the same components. So it's possible not to rely on one manufacturer, and then that's one thing, the standardization. But also because buildings are not typically the same, you have to productize in a way buildings so that you can use repetitive solutions, and there I think that robots will play a key role in the future, that they allow us to do manufacturing scale solutions with robots cost efficiently. So I think that's one of the key uses of robots in the future in this industry.
Yeah, and then I think, adding an AI layer and then visualization tools in a virtual environment where you can actually look at, a multitude of uses for a particular prefabricated piece, so that the, I guess from an architect standpoint, they don't feel boxed in, right, by prefabrication, but that they actually have, just a slightly different palette to choose from.
Yes, you're right, because that is, of course, one of the scares that designers have, that now I'm becoming useless, and machines are going to do the design in the future. I think that machines are definitely going to do a lot of design in the future, and replace what I would call route work in the industry, which actually doesn't require a professional designer, but there's still a lot of work to do for every architect in the world. I'm sure. So I wouldn't be too scared about that. But I see that AI is one of the key technologies in general, overall in the construction industry. For example, when we are now getting so much data from the construction site, from all sorts of sensors, video cameras, 3D scanners, and so on, it's humanly impossible to process that data, for example, for quality inspections. And that's why we will definitely need AI and machine learning to be able to utilize those efficiently.
And I think we're going to hit a critical mass of data where not only are we able to use it on site as a mechanism for measuring kind of the level of as built, but then to be able to start to predict and optimize the way that we're actually building. If we're able to aggregate all of the data, like the robots are taking a tremendous amount of data, and we're doing LiDAR scans. And so if we're able to take that every step of the process, how do you see then being able to really implement much more of a kind of a predictive design methodology, so that you're actually designing towards a very efficient, build cycle?
Yeah, a good question again. So the problem that I see in as an architect, I thought we were basing our decisions on previous understanding of our work. So we didn't really get, for example, enough feedback from the construction side or the users of the buildings and environments that we were building. So we didn't really know. We were just guessing and using our professional judgment to do things and decide on things. So that's one thing that I would love to see a change in that respect, that we could actually get the data to use as a tool for creating better solutions in the future. And also in general, the amount of data is going to be so huge that it requires these tools. And but one thing that is also, when we are talking about gaps in the process, one gap is of course when the building, for example, is completed and it's handed over to the owner and the users. And there's still a huge gap there, information wise, and that's something that we need to consider, because finally construction is just a short period in the life cycle of a building, and the real value comes from the use that it serves. So that's a bigger problem in the future to solve.
See, I love that you brought that up, because, and this is across multiple industries. Often we're so focused on the product that we forget the usability factor, and a truly good designer thinks about the user first and then designs to the user. And so how do you see the evolution of smart buildings now? You mentioned sensors, and sensors are being built into these buildings now. So not only can a smart building kind of assess its own needs, but are we building the data that we're collecting to understand kind of the ergonomics and the flow of a particular building relative to how it's being used? Do you see that happening today, or are you hopeful that it'll happen in the future?
I think there are certainly um, some point point examples in across the world about that, but those are really the spearhead projects where we have seen the building that really creates a lot of data, and it's actually being used for these purposes. So it's really not mainstream by any means. So it's but I'm sure that it will be in the future, because first of all, when we are now building any type of building, and we have seen that recently, how the original use may not be valid anymore, because, for example, the way we work will change and the way we will live will change. So that means that the building that will be there for several decades has to be flexible enough, has to be responsive to the needs of the users, and that's a huge challenge. But apart from construction technology, I see a lot of things happening in the prop tech world and prop tech startups. There are many of those. Unfortunately, most of them are focused on transactional innovations regarding transactions in the real estate world. But I'm sure that this continuum from the use to the design and back will emerge, and it has to, because we don't have, and of course the environmental aspect is one that is going to define a lot of our solutions in the future, and that's also a thing that we need data and technology to manage.
And we need more of your living walls in these buildings in the future.
Yeah, that's a that's a good example of a wall that understands where it is, and can report back when it needs more fertilizers and water and so on. And it's totally automated. All the things. It's by a Finnish company, Nava, and it's at on our premises in Helsinki.
And I wish we had more time, because it's been so refreshing. First of all, I hope it's been refreshing for you to actually get to expand on these ideas that you work with your clients on, but also just being able to share with us some insights. And you brought up so many pieces that I think a lot of companies just it's hard for them to be future forward while running their businesses. And I really appreciate some of your insights here, and would love to hear, this is a question I ask everyone at the end of the interview. So if you could project yourself, 20, 30 years in the future, and you could have, any device or, technology that, makes you happy or makes your life better, what would it be and what would it do?
I know that predicting the future is really difficult, and trying to imagine even because already during my work life, things have changed so much. So it's really difficult to imagine. But based on the experiences that I've had recently, I would love to see a technology that would allow us to communicate better, not on Zoom, but somehow on a different level totally. So that's something that the connection between people and individuals. How can we connect more efficiently and more humanly? That would be something. I don't know if it's a hologram or technology or whatever, but today's technology is really primitive, and I'm looking forward to seeing something completely different in terms of human to human communication.
I love that. Well, I think maybe our next interview we should have in either virtual or augmented reality, and we can be avatars or holograms.
I've tried it. Yeah, it's funny that when you're in that virtual space for a few minutes, you forget about it. You
Yeah.
become part of that.
You forget about time too. Whenever I have people go into VR in particular, and I ask them how long they think they've been in, they usually miss it by about half, because they're so immersed, and they think, I was really in there for 30 minutes. It felt like 10. So.
Yeah. If I can add one thing, that we talked about technology and the shiny objects and others, but the truth is that oftentimes people who invent technologies, they don't invent the use of the technology, and that's for the users, for us to do. That's our role. I remember Nokia, the mobile phone manufacturer in Finland, in the 90s, they had invented SMS, text messaging. And I remember, because we were designing R&D buildings and factories from them, I remember that one day that they said that we have this new thing, we can send messages on the phone, but we don't have any idea if it's of any use. So they didn't come up, the engineers didn't come up with the use, but it turned out to be a multi-billion-dollar industry.
Indeed. No, I think that's right. And I think, imagine if they had engaged users really early in the process and said, how would you use this? That maybe we would have gotten away, because remember, it started with the ABC, and you'd have to get twice to get B, and it was a little bit of a challenge. But
so my message is, my message is that we are all innovators and without us, the technology is worth nothing.
Indeed, that is exactly right. It has been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Amy. And we would have so much to talk, but we just scratched the surface. But it was.
We'll have to have you back on.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Okay. Have a nice day.